I'm Fiona Nicolson, Fee Nicolson. I'm a cognitive hypnotherapist. So I work with patients, clients, to help free them from the learnt behaviours, the problem patterns, the issues that are holding them back in some way in their lives. Maybe from having the life they want, maybe from reaching their full potential. So how does what I do fit in with the rest of the pelvic health group? How does it fit in with what you guys do? We know increasingly about the mind and body connection, something in the mind influencing something in the body, and vice versa. And how important, increasingly important it is to take a holistic approach. And we've seen that from both presentations so far this evening. It's not just about pain, it's not just about physicality in isolation. There's a huge emotional and mental aspect to it. So it's about working together holistically in order to deliver the optimum, the best therapeutic outcomes that we can. So, stuff we're going to cover tonight, a tiny bit about me. Again, just a tiny bit about the mind-body connection. And what is cognitive hypnotherapy? Beliefs, and how to change them, and the impact that can have. How do we develop these beliefs, and what can be done to free people from their current belief system? And what does this actually mean for pain? And when I use the word pain tonight, I don't necessarily mean specifically pain. I'm just using that as a word. It can be whatever the patient thinks it is: discomfort, uncomfortable feeling, pain, burning. So I'm going to call it pain, but when I'm working with somebody, I would use their terminology, however it manifests for them subjectively. A case study, and how you can help your clients. So what we're going to do at the end is we're going to do an NLP technique called spinning, which is really simple, really, really easy to learn. Tim, thank you. You've agreed to help me this evening later on just to demonstrate it. But it's something you guys can do with your patients really easily. It starts to give them control, which is brilliant. Demonstration with Tim, and any questions? Okay, my background. Cognitive hypnotherapist, as I said. I work extensively, not just with women's and men's sexual health, but I work extensively with anxiety, with very high levels of trauma. I work a lot with rape, abuse, very difficult traumatic births, pregnancies, miscarriages, all that sort of thing. I work with anxiety. I work with beliefs and the belief systems, fears as well, fear of failure, fear of getting it wrong, fear of what everybody in the world thinks about me. Those are the sorts of things I work with. That's the kind of stuff I like working with. Traditionally, hypnotherapists are thought of, do a bit of weight loss or sort out some phobias. I don't work with that kind of stuff. Why? Because I like working with the gritty end of therapy. I'm much more keen on working with that, almost trying to find that thread that comes from through somebody's childhood, that colours the whole of their life, trying to find that thread and change it. That's what I like doing. Based in Harley Street, Henley-on-Thames. Until very recently, I worked with the Apprentice programme with Jamie Oliver's 15. That, unfortunately, that programme has now changed its format, and I can't work with them anymore. These guys are unbelievable. They are just amazing, the apprentices. They come from really difficult backgrounds, prison, gangs, drugs, and they're desperate to move away from their existence, their current existence, to make a difference to their own lives. So it was a wonderful for 5 years to be able to work with them. It was a real honour to be part of their journey. And I actually got an award from Jamie Oliver last year for the work. Published a book, been on radio, and write for a journal. Okay, mind-body connection. As we said, and we've seen from the last two presentations, it's becoming more increasingly a holistic approach to working with patients, because it's not just about the body. The mind has a huge effect on the body. We're not separate parts. We're a synergistic collection of our mind, our body, our spirit. But the interesting thing, one of many interesting things to remember, we're not yet developed for modern living. Our unconscious thinks that we're still living like cavemen. So it's looking for danger all the time, survival mechanism, we'll come on to that in a minute. But it's not looking for the kind of dangers that we're experiencing in modern living. It's looking for a saber-toothed tiger to come and maybe eat us. It's not geared up, it's not programmed for this constant bombardment of information, of noise, of responsibilities. Oh my God, am I going to present this well? Will everybody think I'm doing a good job? Oh my God, well, what will my boss think of me? Will I get the kids to school on time? What am I going to do for dinner? There's constant bombardment, expectations of ourselves. We put so much pressure on ourselves. And we're not built for modern living. We're built for different times. So we don't deal with the anxiety, with the stress in the same way. And that causes problems in the mind, in the brain, and ultimately physically as well. Nearly all of you work with the body. That's what you do. Some of you probably also work with the mind as well. I work with the mind, I work with the brain, but I don't just work with how the brain functions. In fact, I'm not that interested in that. What I'm really interested in is the software, the programs that are running, and how those programs can really define how a person behaves, what they perceive, how they filter their world. So I'm working to reprogram people's minds in a way so that they can have a different life. Again, I've just said all that. I think it's interesting again to remember this mind-body connection, and in fact, just one of many, many examples, there's neural tissue all over the body. We kind of forget that sometimes, and especially in the gut. In fact, there's more neurons in the gut than in the spinal column. And we all say at some point, oh, I've got a gut feeling about it. And quite often these old wives' tales, these old adages are very, very true. And again, going back to we're not developed for modern living. So we have these levels of ongoing anxiety, ongoing stress. And stress response, it drives the sympathetic nervous system. And it's necessary for survival. We talk about fight, flight, and more recently about freeze as well. We all do one of three, and hopefully we don't ever really need to find out. But some people fight to the death, some people run like hell, and other people freeze. I'm not here, hoping that that saber-toothed tiger is going to sprint right past them and beyond to the guy who's running like hell. And we talked earlier also about the placebo effect. It's amazing. Somebody can give us a little pink pill that's made of sugar and tell us, oh, it's going to make you feel better. Really, it's going to change everything, and we believe them, and our bodies respond in that way. It's incredible. And apparently, recently somebody told me, apparently drugs only have to be 5% more effective than the placebo effect in clinical trials in order to be licensed. How amazing is that? How strong is the mind effect on the body? Okay, cognitive hypnotherapy. So I don't just use hypnotherapy. I use a range of different techniques. I use hypnosis, obviously, but I also use NLP. And some of you may be trained here in NLP, but people often say to me, what the hell is NLP? Neuro-linguistic programming, which is a really complicated name. For what it is, in effect, is a very useful basket of therapeutic tools. There are a couple of guys back in the 70s, really clever guys. One was a linguist, the other one was a mathematician. And they happened to notice, for whatever reason, that there were some really successful therapists. I don't mean financially, I mean getting amazing, amazing therapeutic outcomes, far more than the vast majority of other people. Now these clever guys know that therapy really is just communication. And all communication is a process. And if it's a process, then it can be broken down into a series of steps, and it can be taught to other people. So anybody, I suppose, from that point of view, can become a very good therapist. So what they did is they spent time with these amazing therapists, and they distilled the methodology they were using into a series of easy steps, communicable steps that they could then teach to other people. That, in essence, is NLP. It is these incredible therapies, the incredible therapists, taking their methodology and changing it so everybody else can learn how to do it. It also now is, they talk about NLP modelling excellence. It's about seeing somebody doing something well and breaking it down into those steps so then other people can learn how to do it. I use Other techniques I use, eye movement integration, similar to EMDR, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. Fantastic for working with trauma and how trauma is kind of coded in the brain and for breaking that down and changing it. I use emotional freedom technique, tapping, bit wacky, but highly powerful, very, very good, and a brilliant one to teach patients. Again, it's about, and we'll talk more about this later, it's about giving them control back. Once they have control, everything changes. Even just a tiny bit, possibility starts coming into play. And they just feel so much better. Catastrophizing again. I think often catastrophizing comes in when people feel they have no control. It's being done to them. They're passive. Give them back some control, even perceived control, and everything can change. I'm very interested in finding the root cause of issues, because once we change what the root cause of things are, it kind of rolls out and everything else changes. I mention it later, but I'll come on to it now. People often say to me, what's the difference between what you do and CBT? CBT is great, but it is different. And I often work as part of a multidisciplinary team with people with CBT therapists. CBT is more about teaching somebody in the moment how to moderate their behaviour so they feel differently, they respond differently. What I do, what I'm more interested in doing, is actually finding the root cause. Why they're behaving like that in the first place, and working to define and positively change that. So things feel different, their life starts to feel different and be different. Clients often come in, patients often come in, and I'm sure you've experienced this, completely and utterly overwhelmed. They haven't got a clue what's going on. It just feels like this huge, overwhelming lot of stuff that they don't know where to start, and it's really confusing for them. And I often use the metaphor of it's kind of a big pot of emotional spaghetti. It's all in front of them, all intertwined, and they haven't got a clue what's going on. And it's completely and utterly overwhelming. But over a period of time, but very quickly, we manage to unpick it. It's almost like it goes into different pots and they can understand what's going on. And that's very helpful for them. All clients are different. Every single client is different. That's why we use things like subjective units of distress, which I'm sure you guys use as well, SUDS, because it's subjective. They all have different experiences. They've had different experiences as children, and almost like the belief system is different. The way they're filtering their existence in the world is different. So you can get identical twins, genetically identical. They can go through the same family existence, same experience, but their belief systems will be different. How they filter the information coming into them about themselves, about the world about them, is different. So we have to work differently with different clients. Future pacing, really, really, really important. As Carl was saying, if somebody has a future that they're thinking about, and we're all running our future in some way, people run it in different ways, but we're all running it. If that future looks, well, the doctor told me, the specialist told me, there's no bloody hope, going to be like that for 20 years, Tony's going to be running that future in front of him in some way, however he does it. He'll be doing it different to the next person, but he will be running it. So it's really, really important to change that. If his perception is he's stuck for 20 years, there's nothing anybody can do. It's about working with him to change that. I would have talked to him a lot. I would understand what I would call his solution state. For him, it might be, I want to be free. I want to be comfortable. I want to be able to do those things I used to be able to do. So I would work with him, probably using hypnosis, but using language patterns as well, to give him that future pace. So when he thinks about the future, it's not the old future that there's no hope, it's this other future that ties in with what he wants in his life. Once somebody's got that, everything changes. It sort of pulls them forward in a different way. Henry Ford, I'll come on to in a minute, in a different way. Again, I said to you about this before, how cognitive hypnotherapy differs from CBT. And feel free to ask me questions at any time. You know, it's not, don't have to wait to the end, just kind of shout out. And as I said, I work very much as part of multidisciplinary teams. It's great for the holistic approach, but also not just with people from other disciplines, in as much as body people and all of that, but other mental health therapists and everything. So for example, when I'm working with eating disorders, for example, often it can be young, predominantly female, in and out of hospital, so I'm working with hospital psychologists and maybe other therapists that are involved. So beliefs. I think it's very scary to remember that the unconscious actually governs up to 90% of all our behaviour. How scary is that? Who is driving the bus? The primary role of the unconscious is to keep us safe. It's to keep us away from what we perceive as being dangerous and towards safety and security. It's a survival mechanism, both for the individual and of course in turn for the human race. What can happen though as we're growing up? We generate a system of beliefs based on our experiences in childhood, predominantly in childhood. Those beliefs are created by the people around us, how they interact with us, maybe what they say, almost maybe equally importantly, sometimes more importantly, what they don't say to us, what they do, what they don't do, what happens to us, how is our life, our environment, all of that. That system of belief is created and it sits in the unconscious, and we filter whether we recognise it or not. It sits there without us recognising it. We filter everything through it. So if we have developed a belief system that for whatever reason, circumstantially, we believe we're not good enough, we're going to filter everything through that, and the whole of our world we will perceive it very differently to somebody else who has a belief system that they know and believe they are good enough. And that's where it's good to remember Henry Ford, who once said, good old Henry Ford, if you believe you can, or if you believe you can't, you're probably right. So we tend to do what we think we're going to do. The thinker thinks, the prover proves what the thinker thinks, and the other way around. So, how do we generate this belief system? As I said, it comes predominantly from childhood, from the experiences we go through. When we're little, when we're young, we're like sponges. We're absorbing everything we can. And we have to take it all as being the truth, in essence, because we have no points of reference. We don't have the cognitive ability. It's how we learn very quickly. And if we are born into a situation where people say certain things or they do certain things, we have certain experiences, then we absorb that and we develop a belief system based on that. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And as I said, that can be a good belief system or it can be a negative one. We develop beliefs about ourselves, about the people around us, and about the world we live in, and our future world as well. And that clouds everything. Or it can make everything very rosy. It just depends. So let's take two examples. Let's take little Johnny initially. Okay, so little Johnny is born into a very noisy family, very aggressive, it's very violent. It's very difficult for him. He grows up in this. Unfortunately, his mother, and this is an extreme example, but I have patients like this day in, day out. Unfortunately for him, his mother has some sort of mental illness, and she isn't able to show him the love that she feels inside, and she's not able to care for him in the way that he would need to be cared. He compares that with all his friends who are cosy at home. They're having a life that he would want. He doesn't really understand what's going on, so he has to draw conclusions from what's happening to him. His mother isn't looking after him. So in his mind, he draws the conclusion, I'm not worthy of love. If my mother's not looking after me, I'm not worthy of love. He doesn't take into account, because of his age and all of that, actually that's her limitations. It's not a choice on her part. So he develops this system of beliefs. I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not lovable. I can't do stuff. And what happens, it sits there and everything's filtered through it. So little Johnny, as he grows up, he goes off to work. But suddenly anxiety kicks in. Because he's in this work situation and he's filtering everything in its simplistic form through this filter of I'm not good enough. And it makes stuff really hard for him because he doesn't believe he can do it. But he has to. He has to try and do it to pay the mortgage, to do all of these things. And it creates a high level of anxiety. This can go on for years. And then it develops into physical stuff because our immune system, our system can't tolerate that for a long period of time. He might develop prostatitis, he might develop a myriad of different things, all based on his experience, his belief system, and how he's having to cope with this anxiety. Small Susie, She grows up in an environment, for example, she's loved, she has a nice house, she's taken care of, but she has a father who wants everything done perfectly. And by God, he's going to ignore the fact she got 9 out of 10, and he's focused on that 1 out of 10. She grows up with fears, great fears, fear of failure, fear of getting it wrong, fear of what other people might think, fear of letting people down. And that's part of her belief system. And she's filtering through that. So guess what? She does nothing. Because she's so frightened of failing, it's much, much easier just to stand still, not to do anything, not to go and get the job that actually she's capable of doing. That can go on for a long period of time. And many people deal with that in different ways. For some people, they may become ill because of the anxiety, all these sorts of things. For others, they may develop an eating disorder. Anxiety, addiction, and physical responses. Everybody's experience is different, and everybody works in different ways, and it manifests in different ways. So I think it's not surprising on the basis of that. We are seeing, for lots of other reasons as well, but in a modern context where we're having to deal with so much and we're not programmed to deal with it, an increase in disease and all those sorts of things. Okay, so how do we change beliefs? We can do it, and it's more easy than you might think. So I do a history take. Client comes in to see me, patient comes in to see me. I'll do a history take. I want to understand what's happening in their childhood, their relationships. Were they bullied? Did they have a happy existence? What were their parents like? Did their parents get on okay? Was there conflict? I want to understand that kind of stuff. I want to know about their current emotions. Are they experiencing anxiety? Do they have day-to-day feelings of anger? What are they experiencing on a day-to-day basis? I also want to know their solution state. I want to know how they want to be in their lives, what they want to change. I want to know their beliefs. So I'll say to them, right, I want you to park the rationalisation wherever you need to park it around you. How much do you like yourself? I want you to mark it out of 10. So 0, subjective units of distress. 0, not at all. 10 out of 10, it's as strong as it can be. I'll also ask them, how much do you not like yourself? Because loads of people will say, yeah, no, I really like myself. Yeah, that's okay, it's about 6 or 7. And if you turn to them and say, well, how much do you not like yourself? Oh, hang on. Oh, I think that's about 6 or 7 as well. And suddenly we're going to get insights into what's going on in their heads. I want to know whether they think they're good enough or not. What level's the lack of confidence? Is there self-doubt? Is it okay to get stuff wrong? Why is it okay to get stuff wrong? Is there fear of failure? Do they feel criticised? I'm going to ask them loads of questions like that. So by the time, and I'm going to ask them obviously about their pain, but I want to get an overview because I'm trying to understand not just how they're dealing with their pain, but what may have created that and how I can help them to change that. So once I've got all that information, through experience, I've got a pretty good idea of what I think might be going on. I'm surprised every day, but I get a pretty good idea of what might be going on. So I use a range of techniques to work with the client, to work with the patient, to define the root cause. It may take us a few sessions, may be very straightforward. We might never find out exactly, but actually when we work doing a couple of things, the anxiety starts to come down. What I do is a brief therapy. So I see clients on average about 3, 4, 5 times. I have very few clients I see ongoing. I'm not going to always focus on the obvious. So if they come to me, I'm in pain, I'm anxious, I want to know what's driving that anxiety. I'm not going to take it at face value and work just with the anxiety. I might do sometimes, depends what else is going on. I'm calibrating all the time. How strong is that feeling? How has it changed? How different does it feel now that it's changed? Because it's always subjective, and I'm always feeding it back to clients. Wow, that's changed, great. How did you make that happen? Brilliant. And they start becoming aware that they're able to do stuff, to take control. There is possibility for them to change things. Future pace, again, as I said before, is fundamental, really, really important. Create that different future, get them to run it as a video in their head, ongoing in the background, much easier for them. If we can change beliefs, we change that filter, and their world becomes a very, very different place. They start perceiving things differently. They start doing things differently. Even physically, if I've worked, even physically very, very quickly, I mean, if I've worked with somebody who's been very tense, very anxious for a long period of time, maybe holding a lot of trauma, by the time, even in the first session, I can see the difference. It's almost like the micro muscles in the face are starting to relax. It's very common for clients, for patients to say to me, God, I was exhausted afterwards. Absolutely exhausted. In fact, I have been for a couple of weeks. And often, if somebody's in pain, they're anxious, they're holding themselves like this. And as we start to take the anxiety down, the whole sympathetic nervous system, all the different things start just relaxing a bit. They're not throwing the hormones around, they're not in this heightened state that they once were. Everything starts to settle and they feel tired until they find that new level of balance. I've had clients that have left a session and said, oh, my husband said I look different. I think I look different. And I explained to them, it's the muscles. So what does this mean for pain? Well, we know the ongoing long-term stress, as we've talked about earlier. It can drive physical conditions which create pain, discomfort, whatever for that individual. And ongoing emotional states can exacerbate pain or create it. Carl talked about going up in the lift, getting stuck at that level. Beliefs come into play, and especially if somebody's been told, you're not going to get well. Oh, no, no, no. 80% of patients, no, they don't get well. That gets stuck. That gets stuck, and we have to help them to get rid of that. And it really impacts on their outcome, their physical outcome. It all becomes a negative spiral. The pain gets worse. They feel out of control. The anxiety is exacerbating everything. We can change that. We can start maybe by reducing the anxiety. As they relax a bit, as I said, maybe muscles in the pelvis, if we're working with pelvic pain, they can start to relax a bit too. Gives a bit of relief. Freedom from beliefs. Change that filter so they're not filtering a negative world.
How do you change the beliefs?
I would work using a variety of different techniques, NLP techniques. So for example, if I have a client that comes in and they are in pain, they've got high levels of anxiety, free-floating anxiety, not just context-specific as well. But one of the things that stands out for me is, say, let's say it's feeling of not good enough or not lovable or something. It depends. If there's some trauma, I might use some trauma techniques. But often I might use a technique using some sort of hypnosis. I will get them to use that feeling, get into that fear, and actually take them back. They take themselves back. I never prompt in my language at all, to the earliest event or a time in their life. And we will use some techniques that will take that down. So for example, lots of clients go back to first day at school, or chaotic households, or my little sister was born, or my mother did this or didn't do that, or there's a multiplicity of different things. And we work with that belief. It might be adding learnings in. It might be distancing cognitively. So almost as if those negative memories are uncoupled. They don't disappear. We don't get rid of memories. But we don't have the same emotional connection to them. So it's almost as if we allow them to go down as being part of the life narrative. That's particularly useful if there's trauma. But if there are learnings in there, like we talked earlier, hang on a second, do you think that was about you, or do you think that might have been about your mother's inability? So I might prompt gently, but I won't lead down a path.
And how do you measure that? How do you know that that's changed?
Because I will ask my client at the beginning, if you had to say out of 10 how strong that feeling is, that feeling of not good enough, what level would it be? They'll say, ooh, 8 or 9. Okay. So as I'm working with them, I'll be calibrating. I'll be expecting that to come down. I don't necessarily expect it to come down completely. I'm not trying to slam it down. That might not be useful in the first session. I just have to judge it as I'm working. But I would expect it to come down. I would see what I need to do to help that patient to get that belief down. And then I would, in the next session, be very interested in what's changed. I'd be very interested also in what hasn't changed, because that will tell me equally as much. So the anxiety might have come down, or sometimes the anxiety doesn't come down. I don't panic, because at that point I'm interested in the relationship with the self. So if that was 10 before, that was 9 before, that's not good enough. What is it now? Ah, okay, interesting. It's come down to 7. Even though your anxiety is the same, that's come down. Well done. That's about your relationship with yourself. That's fundamental. Great. Okay, if that's come down, what else has come down? And I will say to them, I'll feed it back to them. So give me an example of how that has changed. That, as it came down to 7, how has that changed in your life in the last 2 weeks, in the last week since I saw you? Give me an example. It's forcing them to find that where the changes are. Once we start getting the changes, it kind of starts pulling apart. As I said, I'm not looking for it to all completely eliminate. Sometimes people have lived with this for years. What we want to do in the first session or so is kind of give the glue that sticks it all together a bit of a prod. Get the glue to kind of soften, to start like cement, starting to collapse. Once that starts collapsing, it comes down. If we're working with fears, if I'm working with fears, for example, sometimes it's useful to keep fears. They're motivational. Fear of failure, for example. If it's 10 out of 10, it's paralysing. People are like this, oh my God, I can't move. If we get that down, and I would say to them, okay, if it's 10 out of 10, what level would be useful for you? And I will explain to them what I'm doing. Because when it's low, at the level that's right for them, they often say 3 or 4. It becomes motivational. Instead of holding them in this panic, in this freeze, it's almost like it's snapping at their ankles, pushing them forward, driving them to get out of bed in the morning. So a low fear can be useful. We're not trying to get rid of it completely.
Well, I think what's impressive with your work as well, you do get results very quickly, whether that's because you go straight and you're a bit like a terrier dog, go on and on until you get to something, and then you're like, yes. And then you get into that unconscious, I suppose. You shift that belief system, don't you, on that first day often.
Yes.
And I think what's really nice about working with Fiona is like when you refer as well, you know that they're not going to have to do 12 sessions or 20 sessions over your scene for a whole year. Because as you say, 3 or 4 sessions really. And you get, you take about 90 minutes to do your session, but you change things quickly.
And also I think therapy doesn't finish when the patient's well again. It's almost about getting them so they're self-healing. Because the brain wants to heal itself. The unconscious wants to change. Once it knows it can change and things can get better, it's self-perpetuating. So I often say to clients at the end of a session, you might feel a bit dusty in there. You might be exhausted. Because actually we've taught your brain how to refile itself. And now it's going off to do that work. So most of the work is done in between sessions. In the brain, not consciously. I might do some tasking, I might do some self-help techniques, but most of the work is done in the brain processing. I say to people, you might get some flashbacks, not horrid, scary shit, just kind of random stuff coming in from left field that you haven't thought about for years. It might just then go off again, and you think, oh my God, why did I think about out in the garden with the flowers and the dog 20 years ago? Woof, it's gone. It's just refiling. Does that kind of answer your question in a roundabout long way? Okay, so it is possible to be free, very much so. Also, what it means for pain is starting to bring into play some ability to take a level of control, perceived control of the pain. And as I said earlier, once we've got that, it changes everything. If you've got a patient who just feels the pain's being done to them, they have no choice in the matter. God, it's hard for them, catastrophizing and all of that. If they feel or think for a moment, just a tiny bit, ooh, gosh, it changes everything. That pain can very much change. Right, I'm going to whiz through. Also using the unconscious, using downloads, etc., to nudge the unconscious away from the pain. So it might be about, a download might be about noticing other things which suddenly become more important than they used to. And it's only until the end of the day, looking back, you realise you've forgotten to think about that pain. Something along those lines. So we're nudging the unconscious. Case study. I chose the wrong one, never mind. I should have done somebody younger and more pelvic pain. But we'll just talk you through this. This is typical. 60-year-old female, well, 60 isn't, but retired 3 years, mother died, chronic pain, diagnosed a long time ago, plus pelvic pain. Anxiety as a child. Currently overthinking, anxiety, lots of loss, mother, health, job, lots of loss going on. Scared of change, belief that things will get worse. Worked over 3 sessions, got the losses down using trauma techniques as well as other things, got the anxiety down, and that fear she was holding ahead of her of being like mum, that was reduced, and then on the back of that the fear of independence reduced, fear of not being independent. Worked with her perception of control, of pain, gave her some control. Final session, she'd moved forward to accepting her life in a different way. It felt better, she was sleeping better. She was from Malta. She went back to cooking Maltese food. She hadn't done that for years. It gave her huge pleasure. It's about using language of possibility. It's not must and should. That develops resistance. We don't want that. It's about, you might find. If you do this, you may find that. It's very simple for anybody to do. So, how we start doing, we get the client to perceive their pain in what we call submodalities. Those are the characteristics of pain. Location, colour, temperature, they're subjective. Texture, moving or still. We don't do them all at once. I'm just doing an overview for you of how I would approach it. And then we're going to role play it so you can see, and we can do it quickly. Again, language of possibility.
Is it just pain, sorry, or is it anger as well? Would you say how they perceive their other issue, or is this just specific
I use it
pain?
for everything.
Okay.
Yeah, it's great for anxiety and everything.
Okay.
But remember, you're changing it in the moment, you're not changing it. It will take it down, but if there's a strong root cause, you need to work with the root cause of it rather than just, so it's a modifier in the moment, and with pain ongoing, it works well with that. It won't change anxiety necessarily in the long term, but it will do, because it'll give the client, the patient, sense of control. Yeah? But you can use it for anything. Okay, so I'm going to get Tim to spin his pain in one direction and then the other. I'm going to ask him a series of questions. I'm going to find out what feels better. I will have done a history tape with him before. I'm going to understand where his pain is. Where's your pain, Tim?
Just here.
Fabulous. Wouldn't ask him like that in the history tape, but you know what I mean. I also will understand what his solution state is in this context. How would you need to feel in order for your pain to be different?
Need to feel more energized.
Yep. Give me 2 other words. Comfortable?
Comfortable.
Fabulous. Energised and comfortable. Okay, right, let's get chairs and sit down. If that pain had a colour, Tim, so I'm using language if. Use if all the time, it's brilliant. If that pain had a colour, what colour might it be? So again, possibility. I'm giving him options, but there's possibility in there.
Red.
Ah, okay. Red's a very common colour. Never get anybody with fluffy pink. If there was a colour you could change it to in order for it to make it more comfortable, what colour might that be?
Orange.
Ah, okay. Orange, good. Cool. I want you to change it to orange in any way you would do that. Take all the time you need and just tell me when you've done that.
Okay.
Great. How does that feel now?
More in the background.
Good. So does that feel more comfortable?
Yeah. More.
Great, okay. If you had to calibrate it before we started, what level it was out of 10? Forgot that bit. What level might it have been?
8, 9.
Okay. And now you've changed it to orange. What colour might it be? What level is it now?
6, 7.
Great, brilliant. So you've managed to get it down to 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Fantastic, well done. Okay. If you were to spin that pain, in any way you would do that, clockwise or anti-clockwise, which one might feel better?
Anti-clockwise.
Okay, great. I want you to speed it up, make it really, really fast. Does that feel worse or better? Say worse.
Worse.
Great. Great. If you can change it to make it worse, you can change it to make it better. So I want you to slow it down. Really slow. Slow it right down. And as you slow it down, what do you notice happens to the pain?
No.
Ah, okay, well done. That's great. So how does it feel now?
Less pain.
Good. That it's orange and spinning and slow.
More yellow.
More yellow. Great. That's often the case, that as we change one of the things, the colour changes as well. And not everybody will respond to everything. Some people are very visual and they'll respond to colour and things like that. Other people are very kinesthetic. They like touchy-feely stuff and they'll respond to texture. So I might say to Tim, but I would have worked with him by now in the session, so I've got a pretty good idea if he's visual or kinesthetic, so I know. But I might say to Tim, what kind of texture does it have?
Rough, bubbly.
Really? Yeah, okay. So if you could change it to a different texture in order to make it feel even better, what texture might it need to be?
Silky. Smooth.
Okay. So I want you to make it silky smooth. How does that feel?
Less. More dull. More background.
Great, good. So you would play with these different qualities of pain, finding out what really works for your patient, maybe what doesn't. If something doesn't work, don't panic. Move on to the next one. There will be something that it works for them. Vast majority of them anyway. Okay, and constantly feeding back to your patient. That's great, well done. You're giving them control. It's something that they're doing. You're not doing it to them. They're learning to do it themselves. And then saying to them, great, that is a technique called spinning, and you can use that anytime you want, in any way that you want. And then after the session, what I do is I send a reminder to patients of how to do it. And then I check in the next session how they've got on with it. Often, patients, I will say, right, location is there. Where do you need to move it to in order to change it further? Oh, I'm going to put it on the bloody end of my foot so I can kick it away. Good. Put it on the bloody end of your foot. Kick it away. So they do that and it feels better. That is spinning. That's NLP spinning. Very simple, very easy, very effective to change perception of the pain. Any questions? I'm being told to move on. Sorry, I get too excited.
Guinea pig doing a runner.
Yeah, thanks Tim. Thank you. Any questions?
Can we take a few questions at the end then?
Shall we? Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a think about them and then do them at the end. I'm sorry for... Thank you, thank you, thank you.